So you should be all set. You do have all members present. And David is just joining us now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, today is Thursday, March 18th, 2021. This is a meeting of the Steering Committee of the Vermont Climate Council. And I'm Suzanne Young, Secretary of Administration and Chair of the Council. So we are here for a meeting with our facilitator, David Plum, has arrived. That's great. The agenda, just gonna look at it on my screen. The objectives for today's meeting are to finalize the process roadmap, which all of you should have received, linked in the agenda, or I'm not sure if it came in an email. Clarify some interactions between this process and the comprehensive energy plan process, including implications for priority technical analysis requiring an RFP, and confirm the agenda for March 22. Are folks generally okay with the agenda as presented? I think I would like to just maybe add to that interaction, clarify interaction bullet, perhaps a broader discussion about interaction between ongoing work of state agencies and the Climate Council and staffing, maybe just to tee it up for a later conversation, if there's no objection, and if we have time.
Okay.
All right, well, welcome everybody. Thanks for all the hard work. I've heard as we were signing on that many of you came from a subcommittee meeting, and I know those subcommittee meetings have been taking up a lot of time, so we'll try to be really sensitive to the time of this meeting. So with that, I think that the first item we wanted to talk about with Jane was just presenting an update on subcommittee membership.
Chris, does Chris have a comment on the agenda before I jump in?
Yeah, I just didn't know after with Sophia's resignation, I didn't know if we needed to also address that, or if that would be addressed by the person who appointed her, or how that was going to be handled.
We will we'll have Sophia send her resignation directly to the appointing entity and leave it to them. That's going to be up to them to appoint her replacement. I'm not sure if that's been done already, but I know that's what we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the way it typically works. You know, the appointing authority gets to appoint the replacement. Yeah. Okay. Without that, I'm sorry, I just was looking at some notes I had made about the agenda. So the agenda is the overview, finalize the subcommittee membership, review the process roadmap, make real-time changes, and with succinct feedback and revisions if we can now. If not, we may have to revisit that. Interaction, as I discussed, between the Climate Council and other processes that are ongoing in state government, and the March 22 agenda. So, thanks. Are we to turn it over to Jane? Okay. Thank you, Jane.
Yeah, sorry to jump the gun on screen sharing, but so hopefully this will just take a minute or two to update you all on some changes to composition of the subcommittees, as well as get your blessing on some lingering subcommittee members that have both been appointed to the Ag and Ecosystems Committee, as well as considered as liaisons for cross-sector mitigation. So first, I just want to also recognize that resilience and adaptation, as you see it here, they are still, these have all been approved by you all, except I'll just comment that this is not the final composition yet. They're still trying to find an additional member who would represent natural resource planning expertise for that committee. Both we're sort of short-staffed there. I'll just note this for Secretary Moore for further conversation, but we're short-staffed there with respect to staffing this committee from an A&R perspective, and the two folks who we had thought of, one from DEC and one from Fish and Wildlife, both declined to staff this. And so either one of them could have provided the expertise that was missing from this committee, but because they weren't able to step up, and some of the asks for members on this committee have declined, they're still sort of thinking about an additional member, and perhaps there's some offline work that we could do on thinking about staffing for that committee. For cross-sector mitigation, there's been no change in the composition in general of the membership. However, both Lauren Oates and Kelly Klein, Kelly representing Just Transitions and Lauren representing Ag and Ecosystems, are being proposed as being appointed as liaisons. The cross-sector mitigation committee just met and as a group approved and supported adding these two counselors to their committee. And so that's for consideration today. There's been no changes currently to the Just Transitions Committee as you last reviewed it. I'll just note that this committee, as put forward, has 13 members. So I'll just note that it's a little larger than any of the others. Although cross-sector also has 13 with Kelly and Lauren's appointments. Ag and Ecosystems, I believe Charlie Hancock is with us on the call here now, which is wonderful, but Charlie represents the forestry expertise that we've been trying to get on this committee. Before there was Ben Meacham proposed from Red Start Forestry. He didn't have the time, and Lauren had the great insight to reach out to Charlie. He joined at our last Ag and Ecosystem subcommittee, and that committee supported adding him to the committee membership. And then finally, I'll just comment, and this wasn't brought up at Science and Data yesterday, but and may be at an additional meeting, but Linda McGinnis, who had originally agreed to serve, has had a sort of a really tragic incident with her family and doesn't feel personally like she can give right now to this committee. So she's backing out. So we had approved her, but not going to serve and has stepped down. So that economic experience that she brought to that committee might be considered further, but wasn't talked about yesterday. So I'll just leave it at that. And so right now I would ask if, in particular, if you all are so moved or have any objections to Kelly and Lauren's additional roles, as well as Charlie serving on the Ag and Ecosystems.
This may not matter at all, but I just for sake of clarity, my recollection is that we had already approved Kelly at the last steering committee meeting. So I think it's really just because she had already been approved by cross-sector mitigation and Just Transition. So I think the formal action now is Lauren and Charlie as the new folks. And I'll suggest next week in the Science and Data Committee meeting that we revisit that topic of the gap created by Linda having to step back.
Thank you, Jared, for clarifying. I'm going to stop sharing unless anybody else needs this.
Lauren, you're trying to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to, one, say last name is Oates. It gets dropped often, but just like imagine the great 80s band Hall & Oates. And secondly, Linda McGinnis, the void. It sounds like Science and Data is going to be discussing this next week, but I just want to, for the record, say that I think having an economist on this council through this committee is incredibly important. So I would just ask that you make sure that's the expert that you're hoping to bring on.
100% agree, and that's been the discussion so far.
Okay, right. So,
Secretary
Young. Yeah.
I think this will come up. I don't want to spend much more time on the membership of the committee, but the staffing, and I think that my questions and or concerns will come up as we go through the process roadmap. As I think what you're suggesting, Jane, is that, staffing these committees is on top of everybody's day job. And there's a lot going on in many different areas, including the pandemic and the Recovery Act and the legislature. And so I think as we go through the process roadmap, I might have a few questions that could tease that out a little.
That's great.
All right. So, anything else? Because we need to truck along with a bunch of stuff, and I apologize I was late today. I had somebody in tears on another call, so it was a little hard for me to pull away. So anything else on this before we jump into the process roadmap? Everybody okay? Okay, great. Wonderful. Thanks, Jane, for sharing that. Okay. Process roadmap. It's a longish document. However, at least in my understanding, it doesn't have any surprises in it at this point because it reflects what we've talked about in a couple council meetings and in the steering committee here. It's just put it in a more narrative form on the page. Our ideal is, if there are any concerns about it, to walk through it right now and fix those concerns. And then you all as the steering committee on Monday can say, we've looked at it, we're okay with it, it reflects what we've been talking about, we think it's good to go. So that's the ideal here, is that we're able to fix any problems that you might have with the process document. You'll notice at the bottom, it doesn't have the final charges for the working groups, because as you know, those charges are being finished right now this week. And so when they're finished and they're signed off on, they'll be dropped into the bottom of this document. So is that a new hand or an old hand, Secretary Young? Oh,
That's
okay. So I guess my question for all of you is, I don't know how well you've been able to look through the doc. My hope is you were able to read it. If you did read it, are there things that you would absolutely want to see changed before saying we've captured what we've been talking about? Is there anything in there that you find absolutely needs some work?
Could we maybe go through section by section, David?
Sure.
Just for
You want me to share my
focus?
screen?
Sure.
I think I have the most recent version. Or Jane, if there's a version that that went out that's not the most recent, I'll share my screen. It should be the right version. Here we go. And give me 1 sec to pull that up. It'll just take a second for me. Okay. All right. So these are the sections, right? The role of the council, the leadership structure of the council, which is you guys, the steering committee, the role of the subcommittees, leadership structure there and the co-chairs, subcommittee membership, decision-making by the council, decision-making by the subcommittees, and then a piece about public and stakeholder engagement, and then a piece around the support that the project director provides and other pieces of support, okay? So that's what's in here in addition to the specific charges or duties of the subcommittees. Some of these things have already happened, right? It's more like capturing what has already happened. Let me roll through the role of the council. None of this has changed at all since we've seen it multiple times. This is the same about setting the direction, etc. For leadership structure, this is the same. This has not been at all altered. What we made sure is that it reflected the facts about how the composition was made of you all.
So David, I know you can't see hand raising.
Probably not. Yeah.
On
So
that,
shut up. Yeah.
No, that on that particular section, I just had some question marks. So the steering committee is going to develop council meeting agendas in collaboration with the council. What does that look like? I mean, how are we implementing that?
I think it's the idea is that if council members have a view on this, and we can also say, we expect as a council, the council can say, we're doing these monthly meetings. This month we're going to do roughly this, next month that, and the rest. You all as a steering committee do the detailed work of saying this is what the agenda really should look like.
Okay. And then I just have a question that we can park for later, because I think I had it a couple of times. Track progress and ensure the process is effective and efficient. And just my question, trying to be succinct, and we can park it and discuss it later or at another time. How do we measure what is effective and efficient?
I wonder if it's better to say if the project is on its expected timeline and with the expected deliverables, something like that. I don't think there's another measure of efficiency and effectiveness that we have, whether than it's on time and it's doing what it's supposed to, and it's delivering what it's supposed to deliver. Is that clear, do you think?
I'm fine with that. I'll put it out to the others to comment.
Anybody feel strongly about this one way or the other, where we just say we're on, on the timeline and delivering as expected? Okay. When I'm sharing, for some reason, I don't have a good way of seeing. I don't even see the head nods. So shout out if you have a negative view on that. Okay, great. Anything else in this section from folks?
Yeah, I had a quick question, David.
Yeah.
That last bullet, in addition to a regular basis, steering committee is going to convene the co-chairs. I think that's a really good idea to ensure that we're creating a cohesive plan together. I wonder what that looks like, though. Do we build in space for co-chair meetings on our bi-weekly meetings here on those agendas, or do we have a separate meeting where we're having the whatever that number looks like, however many of us are on there? I just have a question about how you want to run that process, but I think it's a great idea.
I think it could be either, right? And I think it just needs to happen one way or the other, whether it's part of our bi-weekly or whether it's something extraordinary we need to do because we're at a key moment of the process.
I had the same thought, Lauren. I thought that's a great idea. I think it's going to be really critical to have regular meetings with the co-chairs to provide them a way to tell us how it's going, what their needs are, what the barriers to progress are, if any. So I think it should be expanded to include more than just cross-fertilization and coordination among the subcommittees, but also with the work of government.
Right.
I guess that I'll just offer like an observation about how that might work. These steering committee meetings are only an hour. They're bi-weekly. Just knowing the breadth at which people tend to speak about all of this work now, that would be your hour of your steering committee meeting. And so that could be, if we wanted to think about that as the sustenance of the meeting that isn't ahead of the Climate Council meeting, where it is really focused on agenda building. And so maybe they're once a month that the co-chairs get together, but there won't be room on an agenda for the steering committee to do much else if that's the topic for the day. So
great. So it leans, Lauren, then to the second option of just having an extra meeting, we call it, and say this is going to be with the co-chairs and making sure we're on track. And it's a good pace. So what I'm taking away from this is it implies that will probably be extra meetings, and as Secretary Young says, we can expand to talk about coordination among the subcommittees and other relevant players, or something that allows us to pull in other people as we see fit. Okay, that's great. Are there other things?
Well, I wasn't necessarily talking about bringing in other players, but just talking about, the function of state agencies and departments, and where there may be overlap, or where the subcommittees may feel, they have a role to play in something that is already being carried out by state government. So that's what I was trying to say, overlap with the state government function, ongoing state government functions.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. And the only other thing just here is just for clarification, when I first read the council members appointed by the legislature, I read it a couple of times and realized what we were trying to say. So if we could please clarify that the 4 individuals are from council members who were appointed by the legislature.
Got it.
Yeah. And there's a couple places that could be fixed. Thank you.
Great. Okay.
And then,
yep, go ahead.
Related to that, this is not a major issue, but just for sake of consistency, the question of whether we're naming the kind of seats or positions or specifically naming people. Up top, Secretary Young and Secretary Moore are named, but it looks like throughout the rest of the document, we're referring to kind of seats or slots and not specific people. I don't have a preference either way, but it might be good to have consistency throughout the document.
Right, and this is part of the problem or not problem, but it's just we made progress from the time this first draft was made. So now we do have your names, right? So we could add in names for sure to say, and the process as it stands, the names are these people, right, as chosen. Okay.
Or we could say the Secretary of Administration, the council chair, and the Secretary of the Agency of Natural Resources without names, but I get what you're saying, Jared.
That's probably, the latter is probably preferable, only because, as Sophia's note today shows, we may see some membership changes over time. So
Yep.
it seems like this document would be better to be more generic in that regard.
Okay, great. So let's take away names and make it as sort of more positions. Great. Okay, super. Let's keep rolling, folks, because we have a big conversation ahead of us too about overlap and how to manage with a comprehensive energy plan. Are there other pieces that people want to talk about? I'm rolling into the subcommittees now. Are there pieces about this that folks feel they need to talk about?
I have one suggested change in the subcommittee task section that I'm happy to just post in the chat if that's easiest. It's
Sure.
Right above leadership structure, so it's minor. I'll just post it.
Thanks, that'd be great. Okay, and if folks, when you look at that post, if you have a problem with it, shout out. Otherwise, we'll just take it right on board. Anything else? The new language in here from the last time you would have seen this is here, where we're more explicit that there are two of the subcommittees, Just Transition and Science and Data, that create a work plan that focuses on providing inputs into and reviewing the outputs from the three other subcommittees. And then those three subcommittees, which have a more sort of substantive focus on the plan, have a work plan that mirrors the task described in the statute, right, which is about inventorying and existing programs, identify, analyze, evaluate new strategies, et cetera, right? And this is straight out of the statute. But to make a differentiation, there's three subcommittees where that logic fits perfectly, and then two other subcommittees that are needs to align their work to support the work of the other subcommittees.
David, I might just suggest, just for sake of clarity, that we say something like among them, the remaining three subcommittees, because not every one of the subcommittees will be responsible for, like I'm thinking the strategy for assessing GHG emissions. That's not going to be the topic of adaptation and resilience.
Got it. Yep.
To me, I think the point is that across all of the subcommittees, these responsibilities need to be met, but not every subcommittee will be focused on all of these.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, David, I had one thing there, and again, it might evolve into the larger conversation. I was trying to find a place where we included the statutory language that the plan, I don't know, we start in the subcommittee and the council implementing this, but again, my point is the plan is supposed to be based on reports, plans, and information pertaining to greenhouse gas reductions and climate resilience strategies from the Agency of Natural Resources, Department of Public Service, other state agencies and departments, and where appropriate, the State Comprehensive Energy Plan. And so that has been very much on my mind, because we do not want to duplicate the work of state government. We want, and the law specifically says we're basing it on existing work. So would like to have that be something we work into this, because I didn't see it in the process charter.
Yeah. So I wonder if the idea there is we could just add that text right into here, right? Because it's straight out of the statute, and you can say the subcommittees, are reminded that blah, 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 right? That they should base their work, and we just textually capture what the statute says. It could go right in here. Right. Is there any objection to doing that? Just putting right in this section about the subcommittees, which are going to be doing the heavy lifting on developing strategies, that we put that in there? Jared, is that a new hand?
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay.
I keep getting to lower.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so let's go ahead and add that phrase from the statute right in here. that Secretary Young says. Right, and we can do it right in the same area. Wonderful. Moving forward, leadership structure, subcommittees, the co-chairs. Again, this describes the process we went through. So it just has to match up with what we did at this point. So, you know, and we've kind of done this. Is there anything we need to say on this to improve this?
Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry, the subcommittee co-chairs will. I'm on the bullet 3.
Yep.
Be supported by agency staff, technical consultants, and facilitators. And I certainly understand that the council is supported by staff from the different agencies and departments. I'm really feeling like we need to set some sort of expectation there for everybody in terms of agency staff, hearing, you know, that we've had a couple probably good people who would like to be, you know, staffing the council, but they have, you know, full-time day jobs. And we need to balance the needs of the subcommittee and the council against the needs of the employees to do you know, their work. And I think they've all been very generous. I think the leadership's been very generous with their time, but I'm just, I want to find a way to manage that as a steering committee. So I just throw that out there if there's a qualifier to put in there, or we just have that discussion at steering committee meetings when we find people are being crushed. And then secondly, just to make sure the subcommittee co-chairs ensure open governance training and for each of their new members is part of the subcommittee co-chair's task.
Right. Okay. So the other ones, the second piece seems very easy. Chris, did you raise your hand on the first piece about how to qualify?
I understand the secretary's concern, and I have no problem. I think it's probably we can just make sure that that's understood and kind of manage expectations. But one of the things, and I'm just throwing this out there, we don't have to deliberate this right now, but maybe it's a conversation for a subsequent steering committee meeting first, is I know everybody is going all out with everything that was already on the plates, you know, just related to the regular day job stuff, plus COVID layered on top of that. Now we've got the other federal legislation, earmarks, everything else coming down the pike. And I'm just, as far as regarding our capacity, our timing, and everything else, because this is affecting, I know, state agencies, it's affecting the regional planning commissions, it's affecting local government. You know, I don't know so much about the NGOs. I'm sure NGOs are probably scrambling on some of this stuff too. We may just want to have a real honest conversation about where we stand organizational capacity wise to do everything else, not to slow anything down, not to take our foot off the accelerator, but just really acknowledging where things at. Because I know in my life, in my work, I'm starting to get a backlog just from things that need immediate attention because of timing of things beyond our control. So again, and maybe you guys aren't seeing this, and maybe it's not necessary, but I just wanted to throw that out there as a possibility in case it is an issue. So
thanks, Chris. Liz?
Yeah, quick follow-up. Chris, totally understand and see what you are seeing on that. One suggestion I have that might be worth further discussion with this group, and then of course with the council as a whole, if we think so, is if you go up a page or so to that 6 or 7 item list, you know, it notes right there what's currently item 7, and it was part of the edit that I suggested that we move it into its own sentence at the end. It's intended that this is to be a plan that is adopted this year and then updated every 4 years thereafter. And I think really understanding what that means and what its effect is and maybe what its relief is as a result is super important because it picks up on Chris's point. I think that some of the workload and tasks that we're undergoing, and going through now might have some streamlining if we really focus on the need to have a plan that hits the near-term rules and programs for adoption with the understanding that there's going to be updates 4 years thereafter. Just putting that out there.
Yeah, it's a bigger conversation about what actually is doable by December 1. Yeah. I see some more hands. I'm not sure the order, but I see Secretary Moore and then Lauren.
Yeah, I wanted to build on what Liz is saying because I think she's making an important point, and there's a tension with what's in the statute, and that it directs us to come up with the specific programs and initiatives to meet all of the greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets established by the Act. And so I do think it will be really important to get very much to that clarity. I share a lot of Chris's concerns about the capacity of staff within the agency. I know that Secretary Young also expressed feel particularly acute, and just want to make sure that we've got a thoughtful schedule that allows people to engage and bring forward the expertise that we have, and yet is also responsive to all of the other things on their plates. So look, I just maybe put a pin in it, but I think this is an incredibly important conversation.
Yeah.
And before we put that pin in it, Secretary Moore, to build off of what you both have said, I was going to save this for the discussion on the March 22nd full council agenda, but being now part of 2 subcommittees and listening to the different conversations happening there is a lot of confusion over the complexion of the climate action plan, not only this timeline question, and if we're just trying to meet those 2025, 2030 goals first, and recognizing as new climate data becomes available, as new technologies become available, we can address and alter and adapt it in the years ahead, but also the level of detail within the strategies that are being recommended up. And the 2 subcommittees that I'm on now are not flailing, but those questions have been asked in both of them. And I think direction either from the steering committee or from the full council needs to happen sooner rather than later, as these groups are starting to have conversations now to build those strategies.
Yeah. Secretary Young and then Jared.
I mean, I just echo, I guess I have noted down in a margin here, prioritization. Yeah. I think that's what I'm kind of hearing of the work, and what really are our goals, or what really do we have to deliver on December 1?
Right. Jared?
I agree with all of that, and just to for the record and to state it really clearly, I'll say here what I've said in some of the other subcommittee meetings, which is it is my view, and of course we have to defer to the statutory language, but that given the knowledge we have now, how much and how fast technology and markets are changing, I don't think it is reasonable to expect a plan that could, with any kind of confidence, assure that we are going to meet the 2050 goals. I think that the plan, the best we can do is to focus on putting together a set of pathways, technology, policy, and otherwise to meet the 2025 and 2030 goals, and make sure that we don't take action that would preclude our ability to meet the 2050 goals. But I don't think that the 2050 focus should really, in my opinion, I don't think that it's really either technically possible or from a timing perspective possible to really show up in the climate action plan by December.
Okay. Chris, is that a new hand?
Yes, no, I'll be brief. And I think maybe, I don't know the mechanics of this right off the top of my head. I've kind of lost track of where we are with consultants and staff and everybody else, but I think we are going to have to come up with like a proposed goals and objectives that we're trying to accomplish by this December 1, 2021 deadline, what the reasonable expectations are that we can all kind of respond to. I don't know who at this point would draft that if it goes to the steering committee, or who would provide support to the steering committee to even propose that. But I agree. In the committees that I serve on and the council, and I brought this up before, I'm just concerned we're all kind of looking at, I think right now we all kind of have individual ideas about what's possible and where we're headed, but we don't really have a unifying concept. So I think that needs to happen sooner rather than later. I just don't know exactly who drafts that. So, but just wanted to.
I mean, I can certainly be the person drafting that, Chris and others, but I think that this requires a little bit of a larger conversation, and I'm questioning where you guys want to go right now with it. But I would argue that there is clear guidance, and that's sort of been provided in what the statute says for what be in the climate action plan. And what you're now all hitting on is the idea of modifying what the statute says and putting that forward for consideration by the Climate Council.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
You don't?
No. Yeah, so maybe we need a longer conversation, but I think the statute in, setting forth broad goals that we need to consider, and certainly we'll discuss, to Jared's point, showing what the path needs to be to 2050 in terms of emissions reductions. The statute specifically contemplates an initial plan this December and updates every 4 years. And there are other statutory frameworks, including the Comprehensive Energy Plan, that likewise require such updating. And the purpose, I think, has to be understood to allow adaptation and change over time to meet, we know what the emissions reductions need to be. What we don't have perfect insight into now and won't is how to do it all along the way. So I would be in favor of a statutory interpretation in line with what Jared said. I think it's achievable, and I think it's actionable. I think it's something the council can do in the time frame we have, and that's what I think we should focus on.
Given that, I wonder if, Jane, the pathway is to ping some ideas back and forth over email. If we can do that legally. Wait, can we do that? Wait, maybe we can't.
No, we can't, but legally.
I take that back.
Take in ideas.
I think schedule a meeting. Yeah.
But I think that I'll just say in response to Liz, I completely can see that perspective, but I've heard contrasting opinions on that and what the statute says. So that's important for us to visit as a group, I think, then.
And if I might, I know we need to move on, and so I don't want to get into this in detail right now, but I want to just surface it as a possibility for a way for us to make progress together. It's always helpful, as we're doing right now on this kind of roadmap document, to have something on paper that we can respond to and kind of ground our conversation. And I wonder if an interim step is having some group of, I don't know if it's the steering committee, I imagine it would have to start there, or the responsibility would lay there. But I think what we need to work towards is almost an outline or a table of contents of what we expect the December plan to include, in terms of, not actually drafting it, but at least an outline of what it will include in the kind of anticipated flow. And not to finalize it, but as something to ground our discussions, so that we can get to clarity as a steering committee, as a council, and in these kind of conversations about statutory interpretation, about what we're actually working towards and backward from.
Okay,
Let's
do it. Let's do it, and let's know that we need to have a conversation about it. Secretary Young?
Yeah, I'd just like to do a time check.
Yes.
We have 14 minutes. I have a group of people waiting for me to chair 3 o'clock, so
Yes.
I don't know.
So
We want to use our last 14 minutes without spending 14 minutes trying to decide. So I'll leave that to you, David.
Yeah, so in that spirit, is there anything else in this document that jumped out at you that you want to say now, right? The co-chair structure, we talked about, Secretary Young put on the on the table this idea that a little discomfort that is a little bit open-ended. Maybe we can be nuanced in the way we say it. Are there other pieces, and also adding in the piece about making co-chairs make sure that everybody has training in the open meeting laws, et cetera. Moving forward on some committee membership, this is already what we've done, right? This is kind of backward looking at this point. So, you know, as long as we hit it right, kind of thing. And it hasn't changed from the last time we wrote this document. The decision-making piece has not changed since the last time we wrote the document, right? It still talks about this consensus building approach that we want to use. We've heard loud and clear that sometimes it's frustrating to know exactly what we've agreed to, so being really clear about that. And the same thing with decision-making by subcommittees has not changed. I will point out that this was in here before and was part of the PowerPoints, that if there is any challenge around sort of consensus when it comes time to which recommendations to elevate up to the full committee, in your process document, it says specifically that the council members of the subcommittee will determine what is forwarded to the council. Okay, so that is your decision-making protocol on the subcommittee should you have any challenges with any kind of consensus-based approach. And then public engagement. This is the layers of engagement that we've talked about in the meetings. We've added the emphasis on, this was here, but it's been emphasized that Just Transition Subcommittee will play a leading role in helping to design public participation. And yeah, and this is what was on the PowerPoint that we looked at in the last council meeting. Okay. And then there's just a piece here that tries to say very succinctly what the project director will do, sort of what's Jane's role. And then the facilitation team role. This is straight out of our RFP in our terms, in our scope, and then technical services, just a sentence on that. Okay, Lauren?
Yeah, maybe not an immediate need, but that section about consensus and when consensus can't be met, elevating only those that didn't meet consensus under, I think the term was a high bar. I do think at some point in time in the near future, but again, not an immediate need necessarily, is that maybe this steering committee or the full council have that quick conversation over what criteria we want to establish to reach that threshold. Only because I prefer to do that before we have an actual example to work with where we might each be biased. If we do that in a bit of a vacuum before those strategies are elevated, that might be helpful.
Love it. Yeah, and I pulled that right out of your suggestion, Lauren, to put that in there. And thanks for noting that. Okay, great. So I'm curious, are you all as a steering committee feeling comfortable with this document and that you're okay recommending it to the full council to say, yep, with you know, Jane and I'll do a fast turnaround on these relatively small edits we just talked about now, and we can show that to you or just do them. Are you guys comfortable then on Monday saying we looked through it, we think it captures what we've talked about as a council and is a good working document? Is there anything holding you back right now from saying that?
I'm fine with this. This is Chris.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Chris.
Likewise.
Yeah. Thanks, Jarrett. Good. I saw some head nodding from Liz and from Lauren. Okay, wonderful. Thanks. Okay, so let's stop sharing this. We have the notes from those changes we just talked about. Normally I'd show them on a screen, but I'm not going to do that right now because we're moving fast. All right. So what we thought was going to be the main course of our conversation today is going to be more of an anecdote and a teaser. And it suggests that we may have to think about how we want to handle it on Monday, right? What we wanted to talk about here is the intersection of the work of the Climate Council and the Comprehensive Energy Plan. And this is some work that the co-chairs of the cross-sector mitigation group and the science and data subcommittee have been working on and worked on yesterday. And it's something that Jane's been coordinating with Commissioner Tierney's office. And so this is a conversation we wanted to tee up now in the steering committee and have again in the council. Yeah, great. And so this is, I'll let Jane walk us through some slides that have been, just put 3 slides on the screen that help tease out the overlap and the separation, right? And I think that's the key for us. And there's a big decision point on this that's important, that's short term right now, which is the technical services and the RFP that you all as the Climate Council support, ANRL issue, what that is versus the technical work that the comprehensive energy plan will be doing, right? And how that talks to each other and is synchronous and builds off each other. That's a near-term challenge that is a decision point coming out of this conversation. We won't be able to fix that today, but there's been some good thinking about it. So Jane, if you want to just give us that teaser, and then we're going to have to pick this back up on Monday and just let the full council chew on it for a little bit.
I held back on sharing my slides, knowing that we only have a few minutes and many of us have hard stops today, and just wondered, I wanted to speak to it more broadly in recognition of the agenda for Monday, and I would rather use your all time right now to ensure that we have a thoughtful agenda for Monday, and want to suggest that see if the comfort level with the steering committee without having had this conversation is okay with proceeding with this topic on Monday, because both science and data now and cross-sector mitigation have had sort of more detailed conversations around the overlap between the comprehensive energy plan and the climate action plan, and our recognition of these separate planning processes, but at the points at where they touch. And both the public service department staff and myself have been talking and thinking thoughtfully about our coordinated approach that we'd like to put forward. There is Commissioner Tierney is meeting with her staff today, sort of teed up to do a presentation to the whole council on Monday. And having not had a chance to talk through that all as sort of our pitch, I guess I just want to pause and say, do we still want to move forward with that? I would hope yes, as it has implications for the timing of our RFP and technical services contract, but also want to recognize the other items on the agenda and how to sort of frame that for Monday. Jared and Chris, you both have hands up, so.
Yeah, Chris, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I'm thrilled because I've been wanting to have this. I'm just thrilled we're having the conversation. I don't need to know right now what the proposal is. I'm just thrilled we're having it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm fine with having that on the agenda and not necessarily knowing what's being suggested.
Great, thanks. Jared?
Yeah, I support it for inclusion in the agenda. I think that coordination and alignment between those two planning and modeling efforts are important. I do want, and I'll say this on Monday as well, I want to make sure that that interpretation isn't such that it would preclude the Climate Council or the Climate Action Plan process from undertaking or commissioning research and analysis that would be additional to the comprehensive energy plan. I think that, it's very specifically what's being laid out is a model that the LEAP model by the Stockholm Environment Institute. I think that there may be instances in which we want to make sure we're using the same assumptions, but there's going to be other types of modeling that we're going to want to layer onto that. And as long as we're using the same assumptions, that we're trying to align kind of efforts and timelines, that's good. I just want to make sure we're not limiting ourselves to the CEP analysis, to the public service department's work, and that we retain the ability to contract and do additional analysis that we need to meet our responsibilities for the climate action plan by December.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's what we've been discussing all along. So yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate all that. I I was the one who teed up this conversation because I had been hearing enough about it to be concerned, but don't know enough about it to make a decision. So I would really appreciate that we focus on learning about the issue and the implications of what Jared has suggested versus my goal will be to not interfere or in any way undercut or overlap with Commissioner Tierney's statutory authority to create a plan for the state, that we are not creating a conflicting plan somehow. So I'm great with having the discussion on Monday, but again, I think if it's something we feel we need to think about a little more, and it's our role as a steering committee to kind of call on that, because I think we are also going to be the clearinghouse for technical assistance. That I'm not sure it's a council consensus, but a steering committee needs to understand it from the subcommittees and work it through maybe at our next steering committee meeting. That's a long way of saying I'm all for talking about it on Monday and learning about it.
Yeah. And I think the spirit there, as you're saying, Secretary Young, is we're not making decisions on Monday per se about it. We're doing a sort of a conversation and understanding the dilemmas and getting some viewpoints out there. And then we're going to need to do another round to really say, okay, therefore, this is how it's going to work, right? And you all as steering committee are going to be part of that second round.
Yeah. And
Secretary Young, honestly, from my perspective, I as a planner and as an administrator, I mean, part of my concern has just been it's involving a lot of the same state staff, same organizations. There's so much overlap for just efficiencies and efficacy and sanity. We just need to have this conversation, and that's why Jared's already getting into more details than but it's just more like these two big projects are so related. I just wanted to know what at the statewide level what consensus there is about how there might be some cross fertilization or synergies or whatever, because they're going at the same time.
So given we only have a minute or so left, I think I just want to flag the other pieces we were thinking of doing on Monday. Before the break, we wanted to just do a quick roundup of sort of where subcommittees are at, and then to look at the subcommittee charges. We will have sort of quasi-final language from each subcommittee by Friday afternoon. Tomorrow afternoon, we'll circulate that around. We're going to give people time to just sit and read for a second and look through them, and then some reaction. We're not making a hard and fast decision on the council, but the council on Monday can say, yep, that feels like we're headed in the right direction, keep moving forward. Or if they feel like, you know what, I feel like this needs to get pushed over in this way a little more, fine, right? But this is not some like hard and fast decision on Monday about the subcommittee charges, but it is some guiding orientation, and we should have the conversation. And then we will also, before the break on Monday, try to go through any concerns people have with the draft process roadmap, which we will share later today with the full council. Okay, so that's before the break. And after the break is this conversation about the overlap with the comprehensive energy plan. And then to the extent we're able to get there with the subcommittee chairs, what that means in terms of the technical analysis that we're going to commission as a climate council, right? In addition to whatever the energy, Commissioner Tierney's office is going to do. Okay, so I know we're going to start to lose folks, but that's what we planned for Monday. Any quick feedback on Monday's agenda and how we've laid it out?
Just my note in the chat.
Okay.
Planning on that, I think, and that's great. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Nice. Got it. Okay. Anything before everybody we start to lose folks? Anything else? Okay. All right. Excellent. Thanks, everyone. We know how tough it is, right?
Is there any public comment today?
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Any public comment that folks would like to jump in and comment on the subjects of what we just talked about? Okay. Wonderful.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you on Monday.
Great, thank you.
Bye.
Everybody. Yeah, bye-bye.